Our keynote speaker of the Impact Summit is Lisa Dinhofer. Lisa is known as the Crisis Tamer because she works with subject matter and circumstances most people turn away from. As a trained counselor and communication expert, she has over 18 years of professional experience helping others cope with traumatic events and helping business leaders navigate through crisis. As a certified Thanatologist, she works with the terminally ill and their families. Lisa was an employee at the World Trade Center during the 1993 bombing, and she was still working in New York during 9/11. She draws from those firsthand experiences of trauma in the workplace and lesson learned from other workplace tragedies to assist business leaders navigating this new crisis. COVID-19 has had a profound impact on all of us. This pandemic is responsible for the complete upending of business practices, colliding concerns of personal health and safety with even the most mundane daily activities. But there are real, tangible steps that we can all take to help us not just survive, but to thrive through this crisis. Let's listen now as Lisa provides these tangible ways to help us as individuals cope with the challenges of the pandemic and equip us as leaders to guide our organizations forward.
Hi, I'm Lisa Dinhofer, founder of Code and Consulting Services, and I'm so grateful to be participating in this weVENTURE Summit and for the organizers believing that thriving is an important topic to include. I'm often referred to as the Crisis Tamer because that's what I do. I'm a Thanatologist, that is someone who specializes in death and grief and loss, as well as non-death losses, with a subspecialty in trauma. Primarily, I help companies regain stability if they have experienced a traumatic or disruptive event to help them move on and adapt to the many changes that crisis requires of us. You know, a recent Kaiser survey reported that 53% of Americans say that COVID-related stress is impacting their mental health, with 60% saying they fear it will get worse. In a separate study, 93% of Americans said they believe companies can survive this if they invest in mental health for their workforce. That includes leadership. Since the lockdown, I've been working with companies all across the country about how this crisis is impacting them and what they can do about it. Whilst I don't have a lot of time with you today, I want to focus on what I've been hearing about the most, and that is dealing with chronic uncertainty and emotional fatigue. I'll cover some resilience building success factors to address so that you can not only survive this crisis, you can thrive through it. I'm a big believer in thriving, and for me, that word has always evoked the image of persisting in spite of. And to do that, it requires that we be able to see past just what is in front of us, the current obstacles or constraints, to what lies beyond that. So today, I invite you to move beyond thought boundaries that may be constraining you more than any social distancing requirement. I'm going to ask you to do a fair amount of reflection today whilst I talk about thriving and how we get there. So you'll see that I'm a big believer in the why before the how. So I'm going to discuss with you why we're being affected the way we are before getting into the how to address it. So it is a time of unprecedented collective trauma and loss across the globe, not just in our country, but around the world. And whilst we're all going through this at the same time, we are not all going through this the same way. Some of us are going through this in well-appointed yachts with all the creature comforts that we could imagine, whilst others are in rowboats springing leaks all over. We are dealing with a constellation of stressors, a pandemic, social upheaval from long-standing social injustice, financial crisis, and none of us are immune. Even Michelle Obama posted a statement about 2 weeks ago that while she's relatively fine, she's been experiencing a low-grade depression that's been expressing itself through apathy towards activities that she normally engages in, a chronic sense of sadness, and anxiety. What this is doing to all of us is shattering what's known as our assumptive world, and we all have an assumptive world. Essentially, it's our framework for how we think the world is supposed to work. It also helps us build a false sense of control. We tend to believe that whilst we know bad things happen to other people, if we do the right things, I eat broccoli, I'm nice to old people, I wear my seatbelt, bad things aren't going to happen to me or the people I care about. It happens to other people. It's really a fantasy. And what's going on here is a shattering of that assumptive world. In the beginning of the year, when we first started hearing about this strange illness happening in faraway places, we never imagined, even for a moment, that that would happen here and affect us on the level and to the degree that it had, because we believed in something called American exceptionalism, which was really part of our assumptive world, that we are always ready to address crises and that we have plans in place and that we have means and methods to address anything. And we just couldn't even begin to imagine that our economy would shut down and we would be at 170,000 people dead. When our assumptive world shatters, it's very frightening because we realize it could happen again and we did not have the kind of control that we thought we did. So what we are all experiencing is a specific type of loss called a non-finite, non-death loss. And this has very specific characteristics, one being that the loss and the grief from it are continuous. It's caused by external circumstances that we are not in charge of. It creates chronic uncertainty and a feeling of disconnectedness with others. We often believe that people don't understand the extent to which we are being impacted. There are multiple losses to deal with and constant change and adaptation to change. We feel helpless and powerless. It's never going to get better. And the two characteristics most endemic for non-finite, non-death losses is coping and support fatigue. We just plain get tired of coping with something that seemingly isn't going to get better, and we get tired supporting other people experiencing the same thing. So I want to let you know that you're not imagining this. You're not being a weenie. You're not exaggerating. Something is happening to you and others. And I call it crisis fatigue. And it's from being in chronic survival mode. Our brain is designed and hardwired to activate certain responses when we're at threat to maintain our survival. The problem with that is we're only hardwired to do that for about 20 to 30 minutes max. We're not hardwired to live like that hour after hour, day after day. Chronic exposure to suffering we see every night on the news, even if we just walk outside and walk into our downtown areas. Businesses that are closed, people who are dying from this illness and families who can't be at the bedside or even at the funeral. The terrible financial consequences of all of this and the inequitable way that certain communities are being impacted versus others. We're engaging in a constant risk analysis. Can I go to this birthday party? Can I go visit my neighbor and just sit on the lawn? Can I go to the grocery store right now, or should I wait until it's going to be less crowded? We're not used to having to do this risk analysis, and it requires a complexity of decision-making that after a while is just exhausting, and it gets to us. The chronic uncertainty of how long is this going to go on, and I'm not sure I can keep doing this. And the moral distress that is coming with a health crisis that not everyone is taking as seriously as others. And with the arguing about wearing masks and social distancing, feeling as though people in our own family or in our institutions are violating what we consider to be an ethical or moral way of behaving without having any means of changing that. So I want you to look at this slide of chronic stress symptoms. I'm going to give you a moment. I want to see if you can identify any symptoms within yourself, people you live with, maybe people you work with. Just take a few seconds to look at that. So if you see a constellation of symptoms that you can relate to, don't worry, it's normal. And I want to bring to your attention this whole idea of what is normal. What is normal is based on the experience that you're having, not based on some pre-designed, generalized definition of normal. You do see rage on that screen, and we're seeing a lot of that, aren't we, in public and even in our own homes. The loss of self-regulation, being able to contain yourself, control yourself, practice self-discipline. This comes from feeling constrained for too long, not having adequate coping mechanisms to deal with the external stressors that are overwhelming our internal resources. And it's also predicated on what happened to this person before they came into this pandemic. You see a lot of cognitive related symptoms: blank brain, brain fog, word retrieval, memory, concentration, retention issues, cognitive organizational issues. These are chief symptoms of our brain explaining to us, I've had enough, I need a break, right? Cognitive organizational issues, that can mean something as simple as sorting our mail, being able to sort our mail into bills, junk, interesting. Even that can become a tall order when we've been under chronic stress long enough, and certainly after a traumatic event. Weight gain is because when our brain goes into chronic stress, it is a threat. So our brain goes into that fight or flight mode, which means that it's going to cascade several stress hormones, one of them being cortisol. When we've got too much cortisol on board for too long, it drives our blood sugar up and we start to gain weight. Having problems making decisions, sleep disturbances. I'm hearing a lot about insomnia. If that's happening to you, you're in good company. A lot of people are feeling this way. So I want to normalize these feelings for you, but I also want you to pay attention if you are experiencing intense symptoms like these and for a very long time, because it means you need to address it. So I want to talk with you about something that will give you some hope. We can be under chronic stress and have even experienced trauma, but it doesn't have to be a permanently negative inflection point for us. We can grow beyond that. And there is something called post-traumatic growth. That is when we grow from experiencing a major psychological disruption and psychological distress. We can experience growth in personal development, our relationships, how we view the world, our spirituality, a vocation or a career that may never have come to pass had we not had this very negative experience. And this growth leads to major changes in our life that elicit meaning making for better understanding of the world, and it opens up a stronger sense of empathy towards others. So how do we create this traumatic growth? I'm glad you asked. Resilience, which is different from traumatic growth, but when we engage in active resilience, it leads to post-traumatic growth. So what is resilience? Resilience is inherent within everyone. You don't look for it external to yourself. It is within you already. You just have to tap into it and grow it, but it requires active intention on your part to do so. It doesn't happen in the absence of stressors, but during and because of stressors. And for me, the biggest factor in building resilience is perspective. And I'm going to talk a little in a few minutes about how to expand our perspective to drive resilience building. Another aspect of resilience building is reality testing. Going back to those fears that everyone is having. It can be very helpful when you can actually inventory and write down your fears, and then one by one go through each of those fears and ask yourself, how likely is this? How probable is this? What is in my control that this fear doesn't have to be realized? And I want to remind you, as something I say to my coaching clients all the time, fear is not a fact. It's just a feeling. And it doesn't mean that it has to come to be. It's just something that we worry about, and it's in the future. It hasn't happened yet. Meaningful connections to other people, people that we trust, people that we can say to, I'm not doing well, I need help, I need some support. And our willingness to reach out to those connections is mission critical to resilience. Resilience can create depression, which brings about a lot of negative self-talk. I'm not good enough, I'm all washed up, I never knew how to be good at this anyway, nothing is ever going to get better for me, I'm not going to be able to bounce back. That's depression. And when we reach out to other people, they can give us a different perspective on how they see us and remind us of a lot of the demonstrated success that we have that we're just not remembering when we're spiraling down. And isolation creates that. So we have to fight that impulse to isolate when we're feeling so low. Being able to recognize what we are grateful for, I recommend that every night before you go to sleep, just inventory and catalog what went right today. And start with the basics. When I opened my eyes this morning, I could see. Can you imagine if when you wake tomorrow and you open your eyes, you can't see? You might be taking that for granted today, but God forbid if that were to happen to you, you wouldn't be. So start with the little things. And the more you catalog and inventory, it helps with a sense of empowerment, feeling competent again. It helps us regain confidence that whilst things are bad, there are still things that are very positive. I'm a firm believer in building resilience through resourcefulness. Being able to rack up a number of small accomplishments. And again, I mean really small. Let's say something in your office or something in your house broke. Maybe before you would have just replaced it or you would have thrown it away and done without. Try repurposing it so it does something else for you, or try to fix it. You'd be surprised being able to figure out how to fix the dishwasher or the garbage disposal or locate something you haven't found in a while and repurpose it that helps give a little bit of beauty or meaning to your life can really help with your perspective. Again, small accomplishments is an antidote to feeling powerless and helpless. Believing in something larger than yourself is also mission critical to resilience building. When we believe in something larger than ourselves, it could be our family, it could be nature, it could be a spiritual system. If it's larger than us, then it is larger than our problems, right? Nature dosing is also mission critical to resilience. Human beings need to be out in nature. There are biological changes that happen when we go out and do that. And we have it documented in research that being outside, gardening, or just walking through the woods, whatever it is, actually creates some of the same responses as anti-anxiety medication and antidepressant medication. So literally making yourself go for a walk every single day, creating that as part of your structure is a very simple and yet powerful way to begin building resilience. I cannot overemphasize your willingness to actively cope and actively seek help as a part of building resilience to keep yourself thriving through what is happening. So I want to talk a little bit about what is uncertainty and ask you, how real is certainty? You know, we can make all the plans that we want, but there's never really a guarantee it's going to happen. Again, in our assumptive world, we believe that if we plan enough, then it's going to happen. But we're learning in a very difficult time that's not necessarily true. So what's your immediate response to uncertainty? Do you always view it with negativity and fear, or do you view it with curiosity and interest? But I want to remind you that you have faced major uncertainty before when you decided to start a business. There was some part of you that the audacity, the hope, the optimism of starting a business with no guarantees, no certainty that it was going to work, but you did it anyway. So you have demonstrated success in dealing with uncertainty. And yes, I understand it was in a different environment, but that is within you. It is not about external circumstances. You already have that. And I invite you to dig into whatever the impetus was that gave you the courage to begin a business without any guarantees that it would happen. So what would your life be like if you viewed uncertainty differently? And this is where we get into perspective and expanding perspective. And one of the ways I like to do that when I'm working with people is using comparison and contrast. And I'm going to give you an example. There is a wonderful PBS documentary on the 1918 pandemic. And I have often, in these last several months, encouraged people I'm working with to watch that. You see what our country, our great-grandparents and grandparents went through at that time. And it was far worse than it is now. Over 650,000 Americans died just in the United States alone. We didn't even know what a virus was, and we certainly did not have all of the tools and resources available then than we do now. We engaged in all the same arguments about opening schools and about wearing masks and about social distancing. And when you watch that documentary, you see how people got through. You see how they managed without all of the tools we have today. It lasted an entire year. They got through it, and so will we. Another documentary I like to recommend, also on PBS, is a Ken Burns film called The Dust Bowl, and it's based on a book by Timothy Egan called The Worst Hard Time. The Dust Bowl started in the middle of America, where the majority of our farmers were. They weren't working the land properly. They removed all of the topsoil, which exposed all of the dust and created a pitch black dust cloud that lasted for 10 years. Yes, I said 10 years. It ruined livelihoods. People migrated to California. People died from eating and breathing in this dust. You couldn't keep your house clean. It finally made its way to the East, where President Roosevelt wiped dirt off of his desk. And whilst that was going on, by the way, the country was going through the Great Depression and World War II. 3 major crises simultaneously. And if our country and our ancestors, our grandparents, got through that, we can get through what we are going through. And the reason why I like reading biographies or looking at films about people who have gone through very hard times is it is inspiring that we can do the same, and we can. So, this is about where you park your mind. I go outside every day for a power walk. I walk through a little path in my development where there's a stream that runs through it. And many times I just sit there and I watch the water, and I just listen to the water. And I deliberately don't take my phone with me, not to distract me. And after so many days of watching water, I began to notice something that was really very calming to me. And that is, water doesn't resist obstacles, it works with obstacles. It continues to flow. It goes up and around and below and over rocks and boulders, but it continues on. And many times when it hits up against a big boulder, it will pause and create a little pool before it finds the next available route. Water always finds the next available route. And I found that very inspiring in considering where we are now. Disruption and uncertainty can create a space, like that little pool of water standing still for a moment. That space that we weren't willing to allow ourselves to enter in before, but we're being forced to enter in now. I call it resting in the pause. and it is a powerful place for listening to what is occurring to us as we go through this, and maybe giving us ideas that we weren't willing to consider before. We start to become aware of what is important to us now and what isn't. When before, perhaps we were just always too busy to stop and listen to those messages. As an example, I want you to think about a time when the unexpected happened and it unexpectedly worked out. Better than you could have planned, even better than you could have imagined. That's uncertainty working in your favor. So if you always view uncertainty with instant fear and negativity, leave room for the possibility that what you are uncertain about could actually wind up being better than what you could ever have imagined. So where do we start working with all of this? Where do we start with the how? So I love this quote from Eckhart Tolle that says, "Nothing ever happened in the past. It happened in the now. And nothing will ever happen in the future. It will happen in the now." And that's all about working with what is, resisting to allow the constraints that we're in to be those thought boundaries, rather than saying, I can't do this and I can't do that, and I'm not going to be able to do this and I can't go back to doing that. Flip it around and ask, what is possible now as things are? The biggest mistakes that leadership in companies make and people in their own lives during a crisis is trying to create a facsimile of what was, thinking that it will create a sense of normal, or creating a facsimile of what they hope will be when this is over. Again, hoping to create a sense of normal. And both never work out because they don't exist. When we work with what is within our current environment and tap into curiosity, asking, what if? What if we as a company did this? And what if we didn't do that anymore? You'd be surprised at how options come before you that you weren't able to see before, that begin to diminish this sense of uncertainty and the fear to excitement about possibility. I recommend that you resist the temptation of binary thinking and false choices, meaning, well, it can only be this or that. That we do that as human beings because we need to simplify things, right? We don't want to get overwhelmed with too many options, but unfortunately, that rules out a lot of options that really could be our path forward. A beautiful example is all of the arguing that's going on since March about, do we open businesses and get our economy going again, or do we stay home and be safe? Do we open schools because children need to be in school and we need to focus on their education in that way, or do we keep them home and be safe? My response to that are, those are false choices, and they don't necessarily align with our values. As an example, as a parent of 2 children, my highest purpose and one of my most deepest values is to keep my children alive and well. Education comes secondary to that, and it doesn't mean education is not important. But if my children aren't alive or well, they're not going to be able to learn either. And I would much prefer to figure out, use all of creativity and resources available to make remote learning as feasible as possible, and childcare with that as best as it can be. Not that it's going to look like what was before, but the best that it can be right now, so that I can relax that my children are safe and getting the education that they need to the best that we can manage right now. Because remember, this is temporary. This too shall pass. So I invite you to start with what you know that is impervious to external circumstances, and that's your values, your core values. When I work with leadership, I have them inventory what their values are, and you'd be surprised how often they really don't know what a value is. They'll tell me, well, I'm very data driven. And what I tell them is, that's a method or a standard, but that's not a value. Your values are your North Stars. Your higher purpose is a North Star. It is what determines your conduct in the world and how you go about doing what you do. The higher purpose of your business. Why are you in business? What is the value that you serve? Not the goals that you want your businesses to attain, but the actual value your business serves. And asking yourself, who are you in that value offering? Your values and higher purpose are not predicated on what's going on outside of you. They are always within you. They always remain. And they are your path forward, particularly when you are in an environment of uncertainty. That is what's helping you envision a path forward. There's a restaurant owner in New York City that used to only feed the 1% in a very exclusive restaurant. When his business shut down, he went to American Express and asked them to loan him $250,000 so he could open up feeding stations around New York City and feed people for free. And after a few weeks of doing that, he said, I don't think I'll ever go back to feeding the 1%. I'm getting far more meaning out of what I'm doing now than even with all the success that I had before. This is an example of living through your values, right? There was another restaurant owner I read about who opened up partially, observing all of the safety measures that he was being told, but he realized he was just simply waiting for the first of his employees to get sick. And he realized, this isn't right, I can't do this. So he said, we're going to close for the duration, no matter what that means. I can't open up knowing that that could risk any of my people. So the first example of someone living through their higher purpose, his purpose is to feed people. And the second example is his values, that the safety and well-being of his people are more important than the financial challenges that he would be facing. So simplify everything. Use what you know and what you can do immediately. Simplify everything down to the basics. If it's not essential, let it go. Just let it go. Create as much structure and consistency within that structure as you can. Human beings and children especially thrive in structure. It gives us a sense of safety and we know what to do. And it's what we have control over. When you have to make decisions in an environment of uncertainty, you base it on what you know to be true when you know it to be true, and that is in the now. And commit to forgive yourself in the future if the future doesn't resonate with the decision you had to make today. Forgive yourself for that. Embrace uncertainty rather than resist it. Incorporate flexibility and contingencies as your normal. And remember that this too shall pass. And sometimes when we don't know what to do, doing nothing is doing something. So we just passed the 100th anniversary of the suffragettes, and I don't think that is any kind of mistake in history. I think that it is it's meant to be that the 100th anniversary of our winning the vote, and we won it, we took it. We weren't given the vote, we took it. That just passed last week. We as women, when we organize as a collective towards a common goal, we're a force of nature. We are a force to be reckoned with. Our suffragette sisters worked relentlessly, in spite of, for 72 years, enduring physical brutality, jail, beatings, forced feedings twice a day for 50 days in a row and more. That's the kind of grit and determination that they had in spite of all the things that were against them, including the 1918 pandemic. And within you, you have a member that reminded me very much of our suffragette sisters. And it's a business owner who was recently threatened with a gun over asking that man and his wife to wear a mask. And I would like to direct my comments to you personally right now. Asking him, are you intending to shoot me over a mask? That was courage in action. I'm sure your knees were knocking and your palms were sweaty. But courage isn't about not being afraid. Courage is about being afraid but busting a move anyway. And that's exactly what you did. You held up a mirror for that overgrown toddler, that schoolyard bully, to take a good hard look at himself. And apparently it worked, because his response to you, as you reported, was, well, we don't need to be here. And I couldn't agree with you more. You showed as much grit and as much determination to thrive and keep your business open, regardless of the constraints and the threats in front of you, every bit as much as our suffragette sisters. And I say, good on you. I firmly believe that women are going to get us out of this. Women are going to be the ones that help pull the world out of this and help us heal. So I invite you, unleash your audacity. It's still in you. I know it is. Find it, dig deep, find it. And after you unleash your audacity, I want you to ask yourself, what's your next available route? It's been such a pleasure for me to be with you today. Please come back on Monday for the live Q&A. Bring your questions, bring your challenges. That's my opportunity to give you my time to do some on-the-spot coaching for you, and I welcome the opportunity to do that. In the meantime, be well.